In this video, we're going to look at how to calculate a percent. So when we're calculating a percent, we're usually going to have a fraction that we write with some kind of a part versus a whole. If we take that fraction and we actually divide that out on our calculator, part divided by whole, we will end up with a decimal. And just like before, if we want to go from a decimal to a percent, we'll take that decimal and we'll multiply it by 100, or move the decimal point 2 places right, and that way we can get our percent. So let's look at how that might come up in a couple problems. The first, it says calculate the percent, if necessary round to the nearest tenth of a percent. So if necessary, we will round to the nearest tenth. So the first one says, what percent of 60 is 43? So when we have this fraction, we're going to have the of part on the bottom and is on the top, because the of, I'm taking the percent of the whole, is the part. So in this problem, what percent of 60 is 43? And one way I can think of it too is if the smaller of the two numbers is on top, my percent will be less than 100%. And in most cases, I am looking for something less than 100%, especially in an application problem. So let's do this. We'll take that 43 and we'll divide it by 60, and that is something you can just do right on your calculator. And I will get a decimal. In this case, it's 0.7166666. I don't even need to do any rounding right now, because the first thing I want to do is multiply by 100. So I do that right on my calculator. That gives me 71.6666. I want to round to the nearest tenth. Here's the tenth. I look one digit to the right. It is 5 or greater, so it's going to round it up. So 71.7%. Alright, let's look at a second example. What percent of 50 is 80? So this is the case where they actually are taking the larger number on top. What percent of 50 is 80? Since 80 is larger than 50, my percent is going to be over 100%. So when I divide that out, 80 divided by 50 on my calculator, I end up with 1.6. I multiply that by 100. And I end up with 160%. So that's the exception, really, where we have the larger number on top and we get a percentage that is greater than 100. So let's look at a couple applications like this. Angelique is a bird watcher. Last weekend she recorded seeing a total of 25 species of birds. 7 of the species of birds she saw were water birds. What fraction of the species were water birds? So what fraction of the total species, which is 25, were the water birds? And the water birds were 7. So again, we know the smaller number has to go on top here because it doesn't make sense to have more than 100% of the birds being a certain type. So on my calculator, I'll do 7 divided by 25, which gives me 0.28. Multiply that by 100, and it turns out to be 28%. On the last one, it says 4 instructional days were canceled for snow. If a quarter had 44 instructional days, what percent were canceled for snow? Well, let's take a look. The total for the whole is 44 days. 4 were canceled for snow. So 4 out of 44. I'll divide it on a calculator, and that gives me 0.090909. So I'm going to multiply by 100, and that would give me 9.0909. If I'm rounding to the nearest tenth of a percent, I look one place to the right of the tenth, and that would round it up. Notice on all the problems where I had to round, I did not do my rounding until the absolute last step. Hopefully that will get you ready to do problems on the handout that's part of the weekend homework.